If you pack a bag, fly to Paris, stay for a week, and then, fly home, well, you took a trip.
Right, you definitely did.
But if you walk barefoot across the Sahara Desert, you did not take a trip.
No, absolutely not. That is not a trip.
Why? Why does the English language force us to completely change our vocabulary based on, how hard the road is or how long we plan to say? Welcome to ESL Listening Practice. Today, we are unraveling 3 words that trick almost every intermediate English learner. If you are listening to us right now, you are probably right around that B2 level.
Yeah, exactly. The intermediate level.
Right. So you have a great vocabulary, you understand grammar, but there are these tiny little traps in English that still catch you.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, it is completely understandable why these specific words cause so much frustration.
Oh, I see it in my classroom every single week.
Right. Because when you look at them in a dictionary or, when you translate them into your native language, they usually all point to the exact same basic idea.
Yeah, they all just mean going somewhere.
Exactly. They all talk about going from one place to another, but, and this is the really important part, to a native English speaker, they are not the same at all.
No, they're not. They carry completely different feelings.
They do. They follow different grammar rules, and, they're used in entirely different situations.
Like I was saying, a student comes back from a weekend away, they are so excited to tell me about it, and they use the wrong word. And immediately, the story sounds just a little bit strange.
Right. It just sounds off to our ears.
So our mission today is simple, but it's incredibly important. We want to share our personal insight, as native English teachers, into the differences between trip, travel, and journey.
We are going to break them down in a very simple way so you can stop feeling confused and hopefully start using them with total confidence.
And before we get started, I want to add a quick note for you, the listener. We know that studying a language can feel, overwhelming.
Oh, completely. Sometimes your brain just feels tired.
We understand that. So today, we are going to keep our vocabulary clear and accessible. We are going to maintain a relaxed, encouraging pace.
Yeah, you do not need to pause and look up 100 words. You can just listen, follow along with the conversation, and we will figure this puzzle out together.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We need to start with the most specific word of the 3, and that word is trip. T-R-I-P, trip.
The good old trip.
We use this all the time, like I had a great trip or how was your trip? But what exactly makes something a trip compared to the other words?
Let's start by looking at the core rules for this word. A trip is usually short, and it often has a very clear purpose.
Okay, short and has a purpose.
But the absolute most important thing to remember about a trip is that it is a complete action. It has 3 specific steps.
Right, the formula.
Yes, exactly. You go somewhere, you stay there for a little bit, and then you come back to where you started. We like to teach this to our students as a really simple formula. Go, stay, return.
Go, stay, return. I want to spend a minute on this because I feel like this is where learners get stuck.
They definitely do.
The secret to understanding the word trip is really that final part, isn't it? The idea of returning.
Yes. If you do not return, well, it's not really a trip.
Right.
I mean, if you pack all your clothes into boxes, get in your car, drive to a new city, buy a house, and stay there forever.
You did not take a trip?
Exactly. You moved, you relocated. A trip requires you to come back to your original starting point.
This makes me think of a visual shape. When I try to explain a trip to my students, I always imagine drawing a complete circle on a map.
Oh, I like that. A circle.
Yeah, think about a map of your country. You start at your house, which is like a little dot at the bottom of the circle. Then you draw a line to a new city. Maybe it is 2 hours away.
Right, you go there.
You stay there. And then you must draw the line right back to your house. The circle has to be closed. You always end up back home.
That is a brilliant visual. The closed circle perfectly explains the feeling of the word. And if we look at our teaching notes, there is another key element to a trip.
What's that?
A trip is often planned. It usually has a clear start date and a clear end date.
Wait, let me challenge this for a second.
Okay, go for it.
What if it isn't planned? What if I wake up on a Saturday morning, the sun is shining, and I suddenly decide, I'm going to drive to the mountains today?
Right, a totally spontaneous trip.
Yeah, I didn't plan it yesterday. Is it still a trip?
That is a fantastic question, and yes, it is. Because even if it is a spontaneous decision, meaning, you decided right at that exact moment, you still have a plan in your head before you leave the house.
Ah, okay, I see what you mean.
You know you are going to the mountains to enjoy the sun, and you know you are coming back tonight. You have a purpose, even if you just created that purpose 5 minutes ago.
That makes sense. I pack a water bottle, I grab my keys, and I have a clear goal.
Exactly.
Right.
This is what we mean by a clear purpose. You are not just walking out your front door and wandering around the streets with absolutely no idea where you are going.
I understand now. The purpose is the reason for the circle. Let's look at some real examples to make this concept crystal clear for everyone listening. The first example sentence is very common in the professional world. I went on a business trip to Bangkok last week.
Okay, let's really analyze what is happening in that sentence. I went on a business trip to Bangkok last week. The purpose here is stated immediately.
Right. The purpose is business. It's work.
Yes. Why did this person draw that circle on the map? Because they had to go to Bangkok to attend meetings, to talk to clients, or maybe to inspect a new office building.
Right. They aren't going there to visit a museum or sit by a swimming pool. The reason for leaving home is work.
Yeah.
And the timing is also clear. They went last week.
Exactly. And because they are talking to you right now, telling you about what they did last week, it is obvious that they are back.
Right.
They went to Bangkok, they stayed in a hotel, they did their work, and they returned. The circle is complete. Go, stay, return.
I want to point out the grammar being used here too, because it is just as important as the meaning. In English, we almost always use the word trip as a noun.
Yes, that's a huge point.
It is a thing. It is an event.
Yeah.
Notice the sentence, I went on a trip. You are treating the trip almost like an object that you interact with.
What's really fascinating here is that the word trip is very clean and organized. It puts the whole experience into a neat little box.
Yeah, a neat little box with a bow on it.
Exactly. If you say to me, I went on a business trip, I don't need to ask you, did you come back? Or are you moving to Bangkok forever?
Right, because the grammar and the vocabulary already answer those questions for me.
Exactly. Now, let's contrast that business example with something completely different.
Okay, our second example is, we took a trip to the beach on Sunday.
Now, this feels like a totally different situation, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, Bangkok is a huge international city. A business meeting is very serious. But going to the beach on Sunday, that is just a casual, fun weekend activity. So why do we use the exact same word?
We use the same word because the underlying structure is identical. We took a trip to the beach on Sunday. The purpose is different, of course.
Right. The purpose is not work. It's relaxation and fun.
Yes. But look at the mechanics of the event. It happened on Sunday. This implies a very short time frame.
You woke up on Sunday morning in your own bed.
You gathered your family or your friends, you drove to the beach, you stayed there for a few hours, and by Sunday evening, you were back home.
The circle is still there. It's just a much smaller circle than flying across the world to Bangkok.
Exactly.
You only packed a towel, maybe some sunscreen, and a sandwich, but you still followed the formula. Go to the beach, stay at the beach, return from the beach.
Precisely. The distance does not destroy the rule. A trip can be a 10-hour flight or it can be a 1-hour drive. As long as there is a clear destination, a purpose, and a return, well, it's a trip.
This brings up another really good vocabulary tip for our learners. Let's look at the verbs we used in those two examples.
Okay, let's look at them.
In the first one, we said, I went on a trip. In the second one, we said, we took a trip. These are the two most common collocations, words that naturally go together. For this noun.
Yes, you go on a trip or you take a trip. That is such an important detail.
It really is, because we hear students say things like, I made a trip to London, or I did a trip to the mountains.
All the time. And it makes sense why they do it. In many other languages, you use the verb make or do for this concept.
Right, like hacer un viaje in Spanish, which literally translates to make a trip.
Exactly. But in English, making a trip just sounds unnatural. It sounds like you built the trip out of wood in your garage.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You really want to practice saying, take a trip and go on a trip until it feels completely automatic in your mouth.
I always tell my students to repeat those phrases out loud while they are cooking or driving. Just say, I'm going on a trip, I took a trip. Get the muscle memory working.
Okay, let's move to our third example for this word. This one shifts the timeline a bit. She is planning a trip to Paris.
She is planning a trip to Paris. This is a great sentence because it really highlights the intention behind the word.
Right. The action hasn't actually happened yet.
Exactly. The person, she, is probably sitting at her kitchen table right now.
She has her laptop open. She has a notebook. She is looking at hotel prices. She's looking at flights. She is figuring out which days she wants to visit the Eiffel Tower.
Exactly. The trip exists only in the future, but the rules still apply perfectly.
Even though she hasn't left her house yet, she is planning a circle.
She is planning to leave, planning to stay in Paris and planning to return. When she looks at airplane tickets, she is looking at round-trip tickets, not one-way tickets.
I love that you brought up the word round trip. That is a very common phrase when buying train or plane tickets in English. A round-trip ticket physically guarantees the circle. You buy the ticket there and the ticket back at the exact same time.
It does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the word trip is just an incredibly efficient word. It saves you from having to explain a lot of boring details.
How so?
Well, when that woman tells her friend, "I'm planning a trip to Paris," her friend immediately understands the boundaries of the event.
Ah, I see.
Her friend knows she isn't immigrating to France. Her friend knows there's a schedule. She knows she's coming back.
So, to summarize, everything we have learned in this first section about the word trip is a specific closed circle. The formula is go, stay, return.
Right.
It has a purpose, whether that purpose is stressful business or just relaxing on the beach. It is almost always a noun. You go on it or you take it. And it's a distinct, measurable event on your calendar.
That is a perfect summary. If you can draw a circle on a calendar and say, "I'm leaving on this day and coming back on this day," you are talking about a trip.
And this raises an enormous question for me, a question that I know my students struggle with constantly.
Okay, what is it?
What if we do not want to talk about a specific circle? What if I'm not looking at a calendar? What if I just want to talk about the general broad idea of moving around the planet?
Well, that is exactly where our second word enters the conversation. If a trip is a specific circle, then travel is the entire map.
Oh, I like that, the entire map.
Let's look at the core information for the word travel. Travel is a much broader, much more general word. It does not look at one single event.
So it's not a closed circle.
No, it describes the overall activity of going from place to place. It is the concept of moving across distances.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me as a teacher, because I know that this is where the biggest mistakes happen.
Oh, absolutely.
So what does this all mean for our listeners when they are actually opening their mouths and speaking English? How does this broad concept change the grammar?
The grammar is the key to everything here. The biggest difference between trip and travel is how they behave in a sentence.
Okay, break that down for us.
We just established that trip is almost always a noun. It is a thing. But travel is primarily used as an action word. It is a verb. It describes what you do, not a thing that you have.
And this leads directly to the most common error we hear. I can't even count how many times this has happened to me.
Let me guess. It happens on a Monday morning.
Yes. A student comes back to class on a Monday morning. They spent the weekend in another city. They had a wonderful time. They walk into the classroom. They look at me with a big smile and they say, "Teacher, I had a good travel."
Oh, yes. Every English teacher knows that sentence.
And every single time, I have to gently stop them and correct it.
I had a good travel. Why does that sound so wrong to a native speaker? Let's explain the mechanics behind it.
Let's do it.
It sounds wrong because the student is trying to use the word travel as a noun to describe one specific short event. They're trying to describe their weekend circle.
Right. They're trying to say, I had a good weekend event with a return.
Exactly. And as we just learned, the word for a specific event with a return is trip. They should say, I had a good trip.
Right.
When you use the word travel, you cannot be focusing on one specific train ticket or one specific weekend hotel stay. You must be talking about the general action. You cannot have a travel. You can only travel.
Let's carefully dissect the examples we have for the word travel. I want to really highlight this general usage so our listeners can feel the difference.
Good idea.
Our first example sentence is very simple, but very powerful. I love to travel and discover new cultures.
This is a beautiful sentence. I love to travel. Here, travel is functioning perfectly as a verb. It is the action.
Right.
Notice what the speaker is not saying. They are not talking about going to Paris next week. They are not talking about the business trip to Bangkok they took last year.
There's no specific date, no specific destination, and no specific ticket.
Exactly. They're talking about their general passion in life. It is a hobby. It is a part of their identity.
I always compare it to other hobbies. Like if someone says, I love to cook, they are not talking about making spaghetti for dinner tonight.
Or they are.
They're talking about the big idea of cooking. They enjoy being in the kitchen. They enjoy mixing ingredients. It is the exact same with I love to travel.
Yeah.
You don't have a boarding pass in your hand right now. You just have a desire in your heart to see the world.
That is a very helpful comparison. You love the idea of packing bags, seeing airports, and experiencing new things. You love the action of moving.
Exactly.
Now let's look at the second example, which brings this general action into a professional context. He travels a lot for work.
He travels a lot for work.
Mm.
We are using it as a verb again. He travels. And notice that we added an S to the end of the word because the subject is he. He travels, she travels, it travels.
Yes, just basic present simple tense. And we use the present simple tense to talk about habits and routines.
Right.
He travels a lot for work. This sentence tells us that going from place to place is a regular part of his lifestyle. It is a repeated general habit.
Let me push back slightly to make sure we're drawing a line clearly here.
Okay.
If he is going to London next Tuesday for a meeting, I wouldn't say he travels to London next Tuesday.
No, you definitely wouldn't.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about that one single meeting in London next Tuesday, you have to go back to our first word.
Because it's a specific circle on the calendar.
Exactly. You would say, he is going on a business trip to London next Tuesday.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
But if you want to describe his whole career, if you want to explain that he is always in airports, always in hotels, always flying to different countries every single month, you use the verb, he travels a lot. It describes his general life.
I am following you completely. A trip is a specific circle, a noun. Travel is the general activity, a verb.
Right.
But wait a minute, I have to admit some confusion here. I am looking at my notes and there is a small warning.
Uh-oh, the exceptions.
Yes, it says, travel is usually used as a verb, but it can also be a noun. Now, if I am a B2 learner listening right now, I am probably feeling a little bit stressed again. If travel can also be a noun, how on earth is it different from a trip?
That is a very smart question to ask, and it is the exact place where the confusion happens. But don't worry, the rule still holds.
Okay, reassure me.
When travel is used as a noun, it does not become a specific circle. It is still talking about the general category.
Can you give me an analogy? How should I picture this in my head?
Think of the noun travel as a giant umbrella.
An umbrella.
Underneath this big umbrella, you have millions of tiny little trips. The noun travel refers to the entire system of moving.
Oh, I see. Let's look at our third example to explain this clearly. It is, air travel is becoming more expensive.
Right, let's look at that. Air travel is becoming more expensive. In this sentence, the phrase air travel is functioning as a noun. It is the subject of the sentence.
The thing that is becoming expensive is air travel.
Exactly. But notice what we are actually talking about. We are not talking about one specific flight. We are not talking about your flight to Paris or my flight to Tokyo.
Right, there's no date.
We are talking about the entire global industry of flying in airplanes. We are talking about airports, jet fuel, pilots, security lines, and all the airplanes in the whole sky. It is the general category.
That is a huge difference. You really can't put a date on air travel.
No, you can't. And here is the most important grammatical rule for using travel as a noun. It is an uncountable noun.
Uncountable, meaning we cannot put a number in front of it. We cannot count it.
Exactly. You can count trips. You can say, I took 3 trips last year. 1, 2, 3 specific circles.
Right.
But you cannot say, I bought 3 travels. You cannot say air travels are expensive. It does not take an S to become plural because it is a massive, uncountable concept.
Just like you can't say 3 waters or 4 musics.
Exactly. It is just one big category.
I love that.
Yeah.
So if I buy a specific ticket from London to Rome, I am buying a trip. But the entire system of flying in the sky, the thing that makes my trip possible, is air travel.
Yes. Or space travel. We talk about human beings going to Mars as space travel. We talk about the industry of moving businessmen as business travel. It is always the big umbrella.
So let's summarize this second section before we move on. We have the specific planned circle, which is the trip, one event, go, stay, return.
Right.
And then we have the general broad activity, which is travel. It is mostly an action word, a verb like, I love to travel. She travels for work. And when it is a noun, it is a giant, uncountable category, like air travel.
If you can master just those 2 differences, you will eliminate 90% of the mistakes intermediate learners make.
I feel like our listeners are in a really good place right now. We understand the specific plan, and we understand the broad activity.
We do.
But there is a missing piece to this puzzle. We have the plan, and we have the activity. But what word do we use when we want to talk about the actual feeling of moving? What word do we use when we want to talk about the specific time it takes to get from point A to point B without thinking about the destination?
That brings us perfectly to our third and final word. And this is a very special word in English. The word is journey. Journey. Journey.
I feel like the word journey sounds more dramatic than the others. as a heavier feeling.
It absolutely does, and there is a historical reason for that. Let's look at the core information. A journey focuses entirely on the experience of going from one place to another.
The experience itself.
Right. We use this word specifically when the process of moving is very long, when it is physically difficult, or when it is deeply meaningful to the person.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because a trip focuses on the whole circle. The destination, the stay, and the return.
Yes, the whole package.
But a journey seems to ignore the destination entirely. A journey only cares about the path. It focuses purely on the road.
Yes, that is a fantastic way to explain it. A journey focuses on the process of getting there. It feels much more personal than a trip. It feels more serious.
Okay, I see.
When you use the word journey, you are essentially telling the listener, hey, pay attention. Getting to this place was a big deal. It took effort.
Let's break down the examples because they perfectly show this focus on the process and the physical time. The first example is very practical. The journey from London to Edinburgh takes about 5 hours.
Let's analyze exactly what the speaker is communicating there. The journey from London to Edinburgh takes about 5 hours. London is in the south of the UK, and Edinburgh is in Scotland, in the north. They are quite far apart. In this sentence, the speaker is not talking about what they're going to do when they arrive in Edinburgh.
Right. They don't mention a hotel.
Oh, yeah.
They don't mention a meeting, and they certainly don't mention coming back to London.
Precisely. The circle is totally irrelevant here. They are only talking about the line connecting the two cities.
They are focusing purely on the physical time and distance of being on the train or driving in the car. They are talking about those 5 hours of movement.
Yes. This is such a clear distinction. Let's imagine I go to Edinburgh for the weekend. I could say, my trip to Edinburgh was wonderful.
Meaning the entire weekend, the restaurants, the castle, the hotel was wonderful.
Exactly. But if I say the journey to Edinburgh was terrible, I am saying that sitting on the train for 5 hours was terrible.
Maybe the air conditioning was broken or a baby was crying the whole time.
Exactly. The vacation itself was good, but the process of moving was bad. You are separating the movement from the vacation. You use journey to talk about the movement.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's look at a sentence that goes beyond just time and shows actual hardship and difficulty.
Okay, what is it?
Our second example is, their journey across the desert was very difficult.
Their journey across the desert was very difficult. Just hearing that sentence makes me feel thirsty.
Me too. A desert is a massive, dry, hot environment with sand stretching for miles and miles. There is no water, no shelter.
Yes. Now, think about why the word journey is the absolute only correct word to use here. You would never, ever say to someone, their trip across the desert was difficult.
No, that sounds ridiculous.
Why? Because the word trip, as we established, sounds like a planned, fun, relatively short circle. It sounds organized.
Right. If you say trip across the desert, it sounds like you are sitting in a comfortable air-conditioned bus taking photographs, and you will be back in your hotel by dinner time.
Exactly. But crossing a desert on foot or on camels is not a quick visit. It is a serious physical experience. It involves real hardship.
Maybe it took weeks. Maybe they ran out of supplies.
Exactly. The word journey carries the heavy weight of that survival experience. It tells the listener that simply moving from point A to point B was a massive challenge in their life.
That is such a powerful difference. A trip is light, organized, and modern. A journey is heavy, experienced, and almost ancient.
Oh, I love how you phrased that.
And that leads me to something I absolutely love about this word. The physical distance, the actual walking or driving, is only one part of how we use it today. Our notes point out that a journey can be physical, but it can also be emotional.
Yes, this is where we start talking about metaphor.
Exactly. An emotional journey doesn't even require packing a suitcase. It doesn't require getting on an airplane or looking at a map.
No, not at all.
It happens entirely in your mind, your heart, or your life over a long period of time.
This is one of the most beautiful parts of the English language. We constantly use the concept of moving from one physical place to another as a way to describe personal growth or difficult processes in our lives.
We use the vocabulary of the road to talk about our emotions.
We really do. Let's look at our final example for this word, which is incredibly relevant for everyone listening right now. Learning English is a long journey.
Learning English is a long journey. I am sure every single person listening to us completely understands the feeling behind that sentence.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when you are studying English at your desk, you are not physically moving your body from one country to another.
No, your body is sitting perfectly still in a chair. But your mind is moving. You are starting at point A.
And point A was maybe 5 years ago when you only knew how to say hello and thank you?
Exactly. And you desperately want to get to point B. Point B is being fluent. Point B is being able to watch a movie without subtitles or having a confident conversation in a business meeting.
And the space between point A and point B is huge. It takes years. It is a long-term process.
It is deeply meaningful. And sometimes it is incredibly difficult, just like walking across that hot desert.
Right. You feel frustrated. You feel tired. Sometimes you feel like you aren't moving forward at all. But you keep going. You keep studying.
It is a deeply personal experience. Think about how silly it would sound to use the other words. You cannot say learning English is a long trip.
No, that makes absolutely no sense. Because it is not a short, planned circle. You don't learn English and then return to not knowing English.
No, you don't. And you definitely cannot say learning English is a long travel. That is just incorrect grammar. Travel is the broad action of moving locations.
But learning English is a long journey that perfectly captures the emotion, the time, the struggle, and the significant transformation you go through as a person.
Exactly. So if we look back at our third word, journey, the key idea you must remember is the process.
The process.
It is the experience of the road. It is the 5 hours sitting on the train from London to Edinburgh. It is the difficult, dangerous walk across the desert. Or it is the emotional, multi-year path of learning a new language. A journey is important. It changes you.
Okay, let's take a deep breath. I feel like we have really explored these 3 words deeply.
I think we have.
We understand the specific, planned circle of the trip. We understand the general, broad activity of travel. And we understand the long, meaningful process of the journey.
Yes.
Now, we are going to do something really fun. We are going to put all 3 pieces together in one place.
Yes. Let's look at what we call the ultimate test. We have a final example that uses all 3 words in a single short story.
Awesome.
This is a very common way a native speaker might talk. I'm going to read the whole story out loud. Listen carefully to how the words flow together. Then we will pull the story apart, word by word, to prove why these specific words are the only correct choices.
I love this. It is like a puzzle.
Here's the story. I love to travel. Last month, I took a trip to Italy. The journey was long, but very exciting.
Wow. Even just hearing it, it sounds so smooth. They fit together so perfectly.
They do, don't they?
I want us to really dissect this, sentence by sentence, and verify it against the rules we just learned today.
Yeah.
The quick comparison rules.
Let's do it. Sentence 1 is, I love to travel. Based on our rules, why is this correct?
Well, our rule says that travel is the general activity of going places, and it's usually a verb.
Right.
In this sentence, the speaker is talking about their general passion in life. They enjoy the big idea of seeing the world. They aren't talking about a specific ticket or a specific destination.
No, they aren't.
It is a broad statement about their personality. I love to travel. It is perfect. Let me play devil's advocate, though. What if they said, I love to trip?
Oh, if they said, I love to trip, a native speaker would laugh.
Why is that?
Because as a verb, to trip means to accidentally catch your foot on something and fall over.
Oh, right. So it would sound like the person enjoys falling down on the sidewalk.
Exactly. You cannot swap the words there.
Right.
I love to travel is the absolute only option.
Okay, let's look at sentence 2. Last month, I took a trip to Italy. Let's check our rules.
Our rule says a trip is a specific event. It is usually short, planned, and has a return circle.
In this sentence, the speaker gives us a specific timeline, last month. They give us a specific destination, Italy. And they use the exact phrase we practiced earlier. I took a trip.
They followed the formula.
They did. This tells us everything we need to know. It tells us they planned a vacation, they flew to Italy, they stayed in Italy, and then, the most important part, they returned from Italy. The circle is complete. They are back home telling us the story.
Perfect analysis. Now think about the mistakes we discussed. You absolutely cannot say, last month I took a travel to Italy.
No, you definitely can't.
Why? Because travel is mostly a verb. And when it is a noun, it is a giant, uncountable category. You can't take a travel, you must take a trip.
Which brings us to the final sentence, which might be my favorite part. The journey was long, but very exciting.
Let's apply our rule. A journey is the experience or the process of going somewhere, especially when it takes a long time or is difficult.
In this sentence, the speaker is completely shifting their focus. In sentence 2, they were talking about the whole vacation in Italy.
Right, the whole circle.
But in sentence 3, they zoom in. They're specifically talking about the time spent getting there. They're talking about the process.
Yes.
Packing the car, driving to the airport, waiting in the security line, sitting on the airplane for 10 hours, and finally landing in Rome. That entire physical process of moving was long, but the experience of doing it was exciting.
To really prove why this word is perfect, let's think about what happens if we swap the word. What if the speaker said, "The trip was long, but very exciting"? How does that change the meaning of the story?
Oh, that completely changes the meaning. If they say the trip was long, it means they stayed in Italy for a very long time.
Right.
It means the vacation itself was long. Maybe instead of staying for 1 week, they stayed for 3 months. The entire circle was big.
Exactly. The trip was long describes the stay. But by saying the journey was long, they're telling us that the flight took many hours. The vacation in Italy might have only been 3 days. The trip was short. But the journey getting there took a long time.
The precision of these words is just amazing to me. They aren't random, they do specific jobs. Sentence 1 establishes the person's passion. Sentence 2 establishes the planned visit. Sentence 3 focuses on the experience of moving.
They fit together like perfect puzzle pieces.
So, bringing this entire discussion to a close, let's think about why this really matters to you, our listener. How does mastering this specific vocabulary help an intermediate English learner in their daily life?
Let's do a quick recap of our core rules one last time. Repetition is how we lock things into our memory. Remember our main conclusion. These 3 words look similar, but they do entirely different jobs.
Okay, rule number 1.
Rule number 1. Use trip for specific planned visits with a clear return. It is the complete circle. Go, stay, return. You take a trip.
And rule number 2.
Rule number 2. Use travel for the general idea of moving from place to place. It is the big picture, the lifestyle, and it is usually an action word. You love to travel.
And rule number 3. Rule number 3. Use journey for the process. It is the road itself, especially for longer, physical, or deeply meaningful emotional experiences.
And the final benefit, the reason we wanted to share this insight with you today is simple. Understanding these differences will immediately help you sound more natural and far more confident when speaking English.
Absolutely.
When you walk into your office on Monday morning and your boss asks about your weekend, and you correctly say, "I took a trip to the beach. The journey home was terrible because of the traffic, but I still love to travel." Native speakers will hear that perfect grammar.
They won't just hear correct dictionary definitions. They will hear that you understand the feeling of the language. You understand the nuance. That is what makes you sound truly fluent.
That is the ultimate goal. Total confidence and natural communication. We believe you have all the rules you need now to never mix up these words again.
I think they do.
We hope this has been incredibly helpful for you. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to take with you into your week. A little something extra to think about.
Exactly. It is something we talked about earlier, and it comes straight from our examples. We established the fact that learning English is a long journey.
Yes, we did.
Now that you deeply understand what a journey is, that it is a long, meaningful process, focused on the road, focused on the effort, and it is absolutely not a quick trip with the fast return, how should that change how you feel about your own English study today?
That is a very powerful question.
How should it change how you feel tomorrow when you make a mistake? Or next week when you feel frustrated because you can't remember a specific vocabulary word?
Yeah, how should it feel?
You need to remember that you are not on a short trip. You are on a journey. And a journey is supposed to be long. A journey is supposed to be a little bit hard sometimes.
There will be hot deserts to cross.
Exactly. But the struggle of the road is exactly what makes arriving at your destination so incredibly meaningful.
Be patient with the process. You are doing great.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us for this ESL listening practice. Keep studying and be kind to yourself on the road, and we will talk to you next time.